وآل محمد.
رحم الله من قرأ سورة الفاتحة. We have a second Surah Al-Fatiha for the marhumeen, all those people who are stuck, the refugees around the world that have lost their homes, their families, died and perished in their travels seeking safety. Let us have a Surah Al-Fatiha for them as well. For the love of Her Eminence, Lady Fatimeyah al-Zahra, please recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين سيدنا الممجد بشير المصدق المصطفى الأمجد محمود الأحمد أبي القاسم محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين. ولعنة الله على الظالمين من الأولين والآخرين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المجيد وفرقانه الحميد وقوله الحق. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. كنتم خير أمة أخرج للناس تأمرون بالمعروف وتنهون عن المنكر. آمنا بالله. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. Awaited Savior Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam. My respected brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Our gathering this evening is to commemorate the martyrdom of Her Eminence, Lady Fatimeyah al-Zahra, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayha. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept our efforts towards her, grant us her ziyarat fi dunya wal akhirah, and inshaAllah allow us to be alongside her in the highest ranks of paradise in the world to come. Inshallah, our discussions will be over two parts, tonight and tomorrow night. And we're going to take one topic and divide it over these two nights. The topic, the theme that we wish to address is entitled Islam's Responsibilities Towards Women. Islam's Responsibilities Towards Women. If you notice, this title is peculiar. It is a little odd. And the reason for that is because normally when we speak about responsibilities and women, we normally talk about it in light of women's responsibilities towards family, towards children, towards husbands. A woman's responsibility towards Islam. Here, the direction of the conversation has been switched. What we want to look at is Islam as a religion, as a nurturing force for humanity. How Islam takes responsibility on its shoulders as a religion towards women. Meaning, how the religion of Islam itself seeks to place women in their rightful position. How it seeks to nurture a woman to be able to achieve the fullness of her life and the very maximum of her potential. Why? Because if we imagine Islam in its truest form, in its purest capacity, immediately you and I will be able to see whether we are practicing that religion correctly or not. Think about it from this way. if I asked you, what is the purpose of a teacher? You will say the teacher is there to instruct the student in such a way that his or her education becomes valuable to them, that they understand the way to learn, they understand how to implement the learning that they have gathered, so that it affects them not just within the classroom, but external to the classroom as well. Or if I said to you, what is the purpose of a parent? Many of you in this room are parents, mashallah, and inshallah the rest of you will become parents very soon. When you are a parent, what is your role? You are there to nurture your child. You want to see your child flourish, to be able to achieve the highest aspirations that they have, to become children of good repute, to have akhlaq, to be a child who grows up to be a human being that is valuable to society. The individual, the family level, the national, maybe even at the global level. Similarly, the religion of Islam seeks to be able to nurture a woman in order to achieve her fullness in potential. The question is, how does that happen? Because if a teacher instructs poorly, then how can the student achieve his or her own potential? If the parent falls short in their own responsibilities, how can the child grow up to be the very potential that they can grow up to be? In the same way, if you and I understand how Islam values a woman, how it seeks to liberate, how it seeks to be able to push and be a vehicle for a woman to be able to achieve, immediately you and I would know if we are practicing that religion correctly. Because if the religion you and I are practicing, or the form of the religion you and I are practicing, is not helping our daughters, our sisters, our wives, our mothers, in order to achieve the fullness of their potential, then it's not the fault of the woman, it's the fault of the way in which you and I are practicing the religion. Because the religion is not at fault. It is our understanding of the religion. And so this evening, we're going to talk about the first section. And tomorrow we will go into the detail of the discussion. How will we divide the two discussions? Tonight, we will talk at a very general level. We will seek to understand how Islam, in the period of His Eminence Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, practiced Islam in a community which had so many challenges to them. And when we understand the form of religion that Rasulullah began to use as the vehicle for liberation, the vehicle to help people achieve their capacity, then tomorrow night, inshallah, we'll go specifically into the topic about how that vehicle is very particular when it comes to the vehicle to help women achieve the maximum that they can within this particular lifespan. What we want to do this evening is talk about two things. We want to remind ourselves in detail, what was the Arabian community like generally? We will also mention what the Arabian community was like for women, women's rights, women's aspirations. Tonight we will also talk about the underlying reasons as to why the Arabian community was the way it was. And once we see the way in which the Prophet changed the community over 23 years, we will begin to formulate a backdrop to the way in which religion is supposed to be. How religion ought to be in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in order for us to be able to go into a detailed discussion in regards to the role of Islam towards women, inshallah. When you think of Arabia in the 7th century, 1400 years ago, what comes to mind? think for yourself for a minute. When I ask you, what was Arabia like? Think about the general challenges that Arabia had, that the Holy Prophet had to come into, that he was born into. And think about the shift in society that he made over the period of 23 years and how he achieved that. The Holy Quran has many verses that specify the challenges in the Arabian community. Some of them are general and some of them are specific. As an example, let me mention to you one of the general verses. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wishes to build a picture here of what the Arabian community was like. In Surah Hijr, chapter number 15 of the Holy Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts forward a monumental verse, a really challenging verse to the mind. He says, لَعَمْرُكَ إِنَّهُمْ لَفِي سَكْرَتِهِمْ يَعْمَهُونَ. I take an oath by you, Ya Rasulullah. I swear by your life, your existence, Ya Rasulullah. Now just think about that for a second, because many times in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes oaths, doesn't he? Wal asr, I swear by time. Wash-shams, I swear by the sun. Now the reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes an oath by something is in order to magnify the importance of that matter. He can't say, I take an oath by a banana. He can't say it because it doesn't make sense, does it? It's not valuable in the eyes to you and I. No one says, your house is burning down, I swear by this banana. You don't say that, do you? You say, your house is burning down, I swear to God it's burning down. Believe me, it's happening right. You've got to come now. Right? Because the purpose of the oath is to put the weight behind what you're saying. There is no greater creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. I swear by the sun and the moon. Okay. I swear by time itself. Okay. No. La'amruka. I take an oath by your life and existence, Ya Rasulullah. Innahum lafi sakratihim ya'mahun. Most surely these people, these Arabs, they're wandering blindly in their own intoxications. Now here the verse doesn't mean intoxications alcohol. It means the way in which they were living was an intoxicated life. When you're intoxicated, you don't have control over yourself. Na'udhu billah. You don't see things correctly for what they are. Your vision, your aql is impaired. I swear by your life, Ya Rasulullah, they're wandering blindly in their intoxications. They're just wandering through their lives, intoxicated, not knowing how to live properly. They're just blinded by this life. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala places the Arab community within this framework. What were the specific challenges that he came to in the 7th century, that he had to change this community? When I talk about Arabia, the most prominent challenge you will normally say is the idols. They were idol worshippers. They would build idols from stick, stones and mud and clump them together, place a name on this idol, say that this idol is representative of a particular power, and then begin to worship that idol. This is one of the problems that they had. Another problem that they famously had within the Meccan community, they used to bury their daughters alive. When a boy was born, celebrations would take place. When a girl was born, their faces used to turn dark in anger, the Quran says, raged. And they would bury their daughters alive out of embarrassment, and also because they didn't see value in a girl, but also because a woman was treated so badly in that society They didn't want their own daughter to suffer the indignations that were rampant within that society. And so they used to bury their daughters alive. One of the most famous traditions in the books of Islam, in the history books of Islam, talks about a man, when he finds out that he has a baby girl, he begins to take her to the desert. He tells her, let's play in the sand. She begins to dig, not knowing she's digging her own grave. And he says, get in. And then he begins to clump the sand on her, to the extent that when she is buried alive, suffocated in that sand, her hand reaches out in order to just grab her father. The father is supposed to be a protector. And this is how they were. Another thing that they used to do in the Arab society in that time, there used to be a community that used to go to war with each other for any reason they could, at the drop of a hat. They had so much tribal warfare. Many narrations talk about this. As an example, one of the narrations states, one day a woman was walking past from one particular tribe, and a man from another tribe glanced at her in a lustful way. Of course, that's wrong. There's no condoning such a thing. However, that one glance at this woman from another tribe fostered 3 generations of war between those two tribes, to the extent that they forgot what they were warring about. Another story about the pre-Arabian community was they used to have camel races. And once, one of the tribes that lost the camel race went to war for 200 years with the other tribe that won the camel race. It was so petty. It was just whenever they could. In fact, some of our mufassirin, commentators of the Quran, tell us that children, boys, when they were born, they were raised in a family and trained for 10 years for the purpose of going to war with the other tribe. That was their purpose. You would celebrate the birth of a boy and decry the birth of a woman, a girl, because you wanted a boy for the purpose of taking revenge on the tribe that you were going to war with. Another example of what this Arab community was like. All these are mentioned in Quran, all of these are mentioned in Ahadith. I'll give you another one. As you know, they used to perform Hajj, didn't they? Even before Islam and its advent of Islam. They used to perform tawaf of the Kaaba, didn't they? Do you know before Rasulullah, do you know what they used to do? The Arabs used to perform tawaf of the Kaaba naked, singing, clapping and dancing. Na'udhu billah. Hajj, pilgrimage, is supposed to be a time of spirituality, reform. The Arabs used to come and they performed tawaf naked, na'udhu billah. Can you imagine a community more decadent in its moral values? One more example of what they used to be like, building you a picture of what they were like. There are 2 ayats of the Quran that say the same thing. The Quran says, لا تأكلوا أموالكم بينكم بالباطل. Do not eat up your wealth amongst each other in falsities. Our 6th Imam, Jaffer Ladak, salawatullah wa salamu alayhi, comments on these 2 verses. And he says why they were revealed to the Quran. He says, then the Arabs, they used to gamble a lot with each other. Now that wasn't revealed for the gamble. It was revealed for what happened after the gamble. The Arabs were heavy gamblers. And as a result, when one used to lose the wager, the bet, instead of paying off their debt with their wealth or what they had saved, or selling off camels or horses or sheep to pay off the debt, do you know what they used to do? They used to sell off their own family members in order to pay off their debt. Who do you think they would sell off? Women from their own family. Na'udhu billah, they used to prostitute their own family out in order to pay off their debts. Can you think of a society worse than this? That when you lose a bet, instead of selling one of your own camels, you would take your auntie or your grandmother or your cousin or one of your wives and sell them off to somebody else in order to pay off the debt. Can you imagine this? Now, I know you and I often have problems with family members and in-laws, but there's no selling off any of your family members to pay off a debt, okay? Yes? But this was what they were like. Now think about this. The Prophet has to come to this community and he has to change their ways, their practices. This is a community that is gambling, selling off family members, going to war with each other, burying their daughters alive, giving no rights, racist, prejudice, that were corrupt to the very core. And he has to shift them and change them from inside. Not just as individuals, but as a society at large, as how they see their own existence, their own purpose. He has to change how they interact with each other as tribes. He has to change how they look at women. He has to change how they look at blacks. He has to change how they look at slaves. He has to change the way they live to a productive society in order to be communities that flourished and could accomplish everything that they could have ever dreamed of. How does he do it? He's a man. Yes, a divine man, but he's still working within the framework of human beings. Rasulullah cannot come and sprinkle magic dust and say, right, change. He has to be able to shift the way in which they have been for hundreds of years, a society that is so embedded in these immoral practices in order to change their thought process, in order to help them become human beings that maximize 70 or 50 years of life that they have been given. The Quran, having disparaged, condemned these very same people in so many ayat of the Quran, after a few years in the presence of Rasulullah, reveals another verse praising these very same people. At one moment, Surah Al-Hijr says, لَعَمْرُكَ إِنَّهُمْ لَفِي سَقْرَتِهِمْ يَعْمَهُونَ. I take an oath by your existence, Ya Rasulullah. These people are wandering blindly in their intoxications. After a few years with Rasulullah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals another verse, this time in Surah Al-Imran, where he says, كُنْتُمْ خَيْرُ أُمَّةٍ أُخْرِجَتْ لِلنَّاسِ. You are the best of people that have been heralded for mankind. Can you imagine a community that is down here, morally, in their practice, after a few years with this grand individual, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praises the very same people and says, there are none like you throughout the entirety of the world. You are the example for humanity.
Let
me give you an example of how Rasulullah shifted their way of thinking. And then we will try to look at the underlying reasons for why they had been this community and what he did to break the way in which they were practicing to make that shift. We mentioned, for example, that the community used to go to war with each other. Tribes were enemies of each other, and whenever they could, being very warrior-like, they would attack each other, they would steal from each other, they would try to take from each other's trade caravan and routes, and so on and so forth. You see, we often think about some of these punishments in Islam. As you know, there are punishments. For example, one of them is for theft, you cut off the fingers. There are 30 conditions that need to be met in order to cut off fingers. For example, if there's poverty and you steal, then there's no cutting of the fingers because you were poor. If there is austerity in you, still there is no cutting of the fingers. 30 conditions have to be met. But why such a harsh punishment? Because, as you know, the Arabs had to travel for months, if not years, in order to sell and come back to their families with a little bit of wealth. If you travel for a whole year away from your family, come back and someone on the highway steals from you, you've been left without anything. As an Islam, as a law, you needed a very strict punishment in order to curtail that practice of theft along the highway. These were the practices within that society. We have to understand the way in which they were living. Now, in light of this, tribes used to go to war. They used to steal from each other. And they lived this very nomadic, aggressive, warrior-like lifestyle. You will remember in the history of Islam, when the Banu Aus and Khazraj met with Rasulullah in Mecca in that year of Hajj, they invited Rasulullah as an arbiter, as a judge, as a man of religion that could build bridges between Aus and Khazraj in the city of Medina. Ya Rasulullah, we have been warring for 200 years. We cannot stop. To the extent that our resources are completely depleted, we are now living in a state of poverty. You know, na'udhu billah, if you've ever seen an addict, drug addict, alcoholic, someone who takes drugs, they will give away their own wealth, their own health in order to feed that addiction, true? Whatever they can do to score that little bit of drug or alcohol or gambling, they will do it, even if it puts their own health or family at risk. War was an addiction to these people. Hatred was an addiction to these people, to the extent that Aus and Khazraj had depleted all their resources. They needed an outside influence in order to create peace, harmony between them. Rasulullah comes to the city of Medina. He arrives as this great prophet of akhlaq and understanding. The first thing he does, he says, instead of considering yourself as Aus and Khazraj, separate entities, the first way you look at each other is brothers. إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةً. Most surely the believers are but brothers of each other. Your identity is no longer primarily Aus and Khazraj. Yes, for your hierarchy and your memory you can still keep and remember, but you are now known as the Ansar of Islam. You are known as believers in Islam. He shifts their way of thinking. The Ansar, they now have to welcome the Muhajirin, correct? Hundreds of Muhajir come from the city of Mecca, and they leave everything. They had their houses, they had their businesses, they leave it all, and whatever they can carry on their backs, whatever they can stack upon camels and horses, that is what comes to them, to the city of Medina. What do the Ansar do? The Ansar open their houses and say, we will give you 50% of everything we have. Take our house. Half you live in, half we live in. Do you know, the hadith, our hadith say, that they used to even give up their own wives in order to give to the Muhajirun. So for example, if the Ansar had 2 wives, this is the hadith, it says, the Ansar would say to the Muhajir, whichever wife you want, whichever one you find more attractive, I will divorce her, you can take her. I'm not advocating for you to do that. Yes, you'll get me in trouble, brothers, and the sisters will never invite me back again. What I mean is, that's the extent that the Ansar did in brotherhood towards the Muhajir. They gave half their wealth, half their houses, and even their own wives in order to accommodate for the situation. It goes further. Do you know there are 3 verses of the Quran that were revealed? Why? Because the Ansar used to give their own inheritance 100% of their inheritance to the Muhajirun. This wasn't from Islam. There is never a verse telling them to do this. It was out of their own humanity that the Ansar saw the needs of the Muhajir. And when a father or an uncle or a brother or a grandfather died and they inherited wealth, they would give it over to the Muhajirun in order to help them establish themselves in the city of Medina. Do you know they used to practice this so much out of the goodness of their heart? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had to reveal 3 verses of the Quran telling them not to do this anymore. He had to institute law to stop them doing goodness, saying, now you've done enough for the Muhajirun. They are settled as people. No longer you need to give this anymore. Just think about that for a second. At one stage, these very same tribes used to go to war with each other. At the drop of a hat, in the presence of Rasulullah, through the way in which he found their humanity, helped them achieve their human dignity and aspirations, these tribes are giving over their wealth. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has to reveal verses saying, stop now, you've done enough for each other. Just think about that at a human level. You know how to make it reality? Not just stories of the ancients? Think about it now in terms of what's happening in the island of Lesbos in Greece. Think about what's happening in Macedonia at the moment. Think about what's happening in Central and Eastern Europe at the moment. You know what's happening? They take refugees, they place them into empty stadiums, place barbed wire around the stadiums, and don't let them out. Why? Because they're economic migrants. Look at the difference, how humanity can treat each other. If the ways in which we have been practicing can be broken from us, those societal norms that strangle our thinking, strangle our humanity is broken, when those chains are liberated, when we're shown humanity and how to really treat each other, that is the example of how human beings can treat each other. Come to 2016 and see how human beings are treating each other in Greece and in Macedonia. It's real. When we see these hadith, it's not fake. This is really how human beings became. The question is, what made human beings act the way in which they acted before Rasulullah? And what did he do in order to shift their way of practice, in order to break those intellectual and moral chains that were holding them down so much? How did practically Rasulullah liberate these people? Did he sprinkle fairy dust on them? Did he force them to do it? Did he, na'udhu billah, like the Orientalists tell us, he was a man of the sword and put everyone to death? Can you put someone to death and tell them to do these things? No, they give their wealth because they want to give their wealth to another human being. What was the underlying reasoning for the people of Arabia to be treating themselves so badly that Rasulullah had to break? Do you remember when I asked you, think about the different challenges in the Arabian society? We listed several of them. What was the first challenge I mentioned in Makkah? Ahsantum, idols. Idol worship was the source for all of those other immoral practices in Arabia. Performing tawaf naked, it was the result of idol worship. Prostituting out your own family members to pay off your gambling debts, na'udhu billah, was a result of idol worship. Burying your daughters alive was a direct result of idol worship. How and why? Why is this so important to understand? The Quran has a very important verse when it talks about idol worship. You know, when you read the Quran, some of the verses, about the future, aren't they? They tell you about what's going to happen at the end of time. They tell you about akhirah. Some verses are about Prophet Adam alayhi salam, and so on and so forth. Some verses are specific to how the Meccan and Medinan communities reacted to Rasulullah. Why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveal the words of the Meccan and Medinan people into the Quran? Think about that question. You only have 6,500 verses in the Quran, true? Why not give us more verses about prophecy, what's going to happen at the end of time? Why not give us more verses about Prophet Musa alayhi salam? Why not give us more verses about, why tell us, why narrate to us what the Arabs were saying to the Prophet in response to issues at the time? The reason when you come across these verses is to build you a picture of what was happening in the minds of the Arabs at the time of Rasulullah. You build up a picture of what the society was thinking, how they were reacting to situations and issues. One of the verses of the Quran says, and it quotes the response of the Meccan people to Rasulullah when he tries to break the idols. It says, أَجَعَلَكَ آلِهَةً إِلَهًا وَاحِدًا? Does this man make our gods multiple into one God? What a strange thing this is. إِنَّ هَذًا شَيْءٌ عَجَابٌ. This is so strange. This was quoting the Meccans talking to each other when Rasulullah would say, come towards La ilaha illallah. He wants to make our gods into one God? Why? Let me explain that verse, how important it is to the underlying reasons of the immoral practices of Arabian community at the time of Rasulullah. Question for you. In the Kaaba, how many idols were there? Do you remember? From your mother's days, how many idols were there? 365 or 360. 365 idols were placed within the Kaaba. You will remember that famous hadith, Amir al-Mu'mineen is sitting on the shoulders of Rasulullah in order to break the idols. Name me some of the great idols, the real famous ones. Do you remember Lat and Uzza and Manat? The Quran talks about various different idols. Why were there different idols? Because each idol represented a god of something different. One was the god for war. One was the god for wealth. One was the god for children. And so what you would do, if you were in that time, if you wanted to have blessings from that god, you would take treasure or you would take wealth as a gift to the god, as a sacrifice to the god. And you would take it to the god, you would place it in front of it, and you would sacrifice it to that particular god. And you would say, "Oh Lat, you are the god of war. I am going to war. Our tribe is going to war. Bring us victory in war." Or you needed great wealth in your business trip. So you would go to Manat. And you would say, "Manat, here are some sheep. I slaughter the sheep for you. I give you some gold and some silver for you. Give me even more in return on my business trip." This was the way in which they used to practice. Now, this is very important. Each tribe had their own idol. So for example, Banu X, Banu Y, Banu Z, each tribe had their own. So you would have Lat, you would have Manat, and you have Uzza, for example, yes? So I would come to you, I would come to you, I would come to you. Now the big gods, the giant gods of the most important issues, war, wealth, having boys as children, all the tribes would have to go towards these gods, wouldn't they? In order to gain their blessings and gain their dua and their shafa'a from these gods. So think about this very closely. If you were a big tribe, right? Lat, Manat, Uzza. You are the tribes that hold these particular idols. All of you, different tribes, smaller tribes, you need the blessings from these three gods, don't you? So where would you go? You would take treasure, and you would take camels, and you would take sheep, and you would take silk, and you would take brocade, and where would you take it to? To these three tribes. So who became richer? If you take silk and you take sheep and you take camel and you all give it to this tribe here for this idol in order to gain blessing, who becomes richer? This tribe. Who becomes poorer? The rest of you. Make sense? Now this happens for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. All the tribes coming to certain other tribes in order to gain blessings. These tribes became the powerful tribes within Arabia. Everybody had to go to them in order to gain their blessings. Very rarely would you three have to go to the other tribes. Yeah, you have smaller gods. Something small. But these are the big gods that you need to go to. What happens? It engenders a political situation and an economic situation, whereby these three gods who have these tribes are powerful and control the movement of the rest of the tribes. They're needed. Now, imagine Rasulullah comes and he tries to break these idols. Who's going to be upset? You three tribes. The powerful tribes. The ones that own the political organization. The ones that own the economics. The ones that are in charge. Who's now being endangered? You are being endangered. Do you think Abu Sufyan is going to take this lightly? When his political authority and financial authority is at stake now? Do you think Umayyah ibn Khalaf is going to take this lightly? No, of course not. So what did they say? Aja'ala alihatan ilahan wahida? Does this man wish to make our multiple gods into one God? What a strange thing this is. Why is it so strange? Your whole city of Makkah is based upon Ibrahim, the father of monotheism. Now you're telling us to bring one God is strange? It wasn't strange. It was problematic to the Quraysh community because it would shift the power that was engendered and was being fostered and the control that was being fostered by the rich tribes of that community. What did they call him? He's a madman. He's a soothsayer. He's a magician. We have to kill this man Muhammad. He's changing the ways of our forefathers. Because you threatened the practice. Now, why was it so problematic to Rasulullah to have multiple gods? Think about this question very closely. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the God of everything. He's the creator of the sun. You know there are suns so hot, so large, that they are 1,000 times bigger than our own sun. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not overcome by the heat, not by the age, not by the width of that sun that can engulf our entire galaxy and burn it. Yet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala finds rocks and stones of mud clumped together called Lat and Uzza and Manat problematic. Why is this? I'll explain why this is so important. Imagine this is your God. So, you and I, we come together, we're a tribe, and we need to make a God. Let's call it the God of Lat. So we get some sticks, and we get some stones, and we get some mud, and we clump it together, and it's shaped in a particular way, and then we place it here. And then I begin to worship it. Then I begin to give sacrifices to it. I give it silk, and brocade, and jewelry, and wealth. And then I begin to pray to it and say, "Oh Lat, you are able to give me rizq. I am going on a journey to Syria in order to, sell my stock. Grant me rizq, inshallah." What's the problem with that? I'll tell you the simple problem with it. If you can believe that something that you created with your own hands has power over you, your intellect has been shackled so much that eventually I can make you believe anything else. If I'd made you believe That this thing that you created with your own hands, this inanimate object of sticks and stones and mud, can control your destiny. Can control your destiny in war, can bring you men, can bring you boys, can bring you wealth. If I've managed to trick you into thinking that, I can trick you into thinking anything else in this world. If now, me, as controlling Lat and Uzza and Manat, establish this way of practice in the community, if tomorrow I want you to bury your daughters alive, I've shackled your thinking so much that you won't even question the practice of burying your daughters alive. If I've made you think that this is your God and has some sort of capacity and control over you, tomorrow, when I tell you to go to war with this tribe, you will also go to war with this tribe because you're not thinking for yourself. If I tell you that the practice of the society is that if you're gambling and you lose your debt, you actually sell off your own grandmother, your own wife, your own daughter into slavery in order to pay off your own debt, you won't question it because your already thinking is shackled beyond belief. Eventually, it wasn't just the aql that was shackled, it was the heart that was shackled. The heart had become blackened through these social practices. In order to change the outcomes of society, the way in which the practice of Arabia had been engendered for 200, 300, 400 years. Rasulullah couldn't just come and say, start treating your women better. He couldn't just come and say, tribes, stop warring with each other, become brothers of each other. Come give your wealth to each other for generations. He couldn't do that. He needed to break the shackle that had created their thinking process, that had made them so backwards as a society. Once he broke that first shackle, the rest of humanity could come forth. What did he do? Tawheed. He brought Tawheed back into the community. He said, stop thinking like a shackled human being and thinking that this idol has some sort of power over you. Do you remember the great companion Abu Dharr Ghifari? You know Abu Dharr? You know how he converted to Islam? He says, one day, I was sitting and my idol was there. You know Abu Dharr? He used to be part of Banu Ghifar. Banu Ghifar were highway robbers. That was the practice of that tribe. He used to steal from tribes that were coming back with their different things that they were selling. One day he's sitting. Maybe he's waiting to go and steal from a caravan or something. He's sitting in front of his God. He says, a fox came to his God and urinated on his God. He said to himself, how can my God help me if it can't even help itself from being urinated on? But it took something in here to realize that this God has no value. And only once he broke that shackle of thinking was he able to stop stealing from those various different caravans and go towards Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. If you've understood this, this sets an important way of thinking for you and I. What would be the conclusions of this? The first thing is that Islam understands the nature of society. That we are going to have problems at our localized, at our national, and at a global level. At a local level, we will have certain challenges within the community, but there will be a thought process that governs that thinking. Then you become wider into your nation, and that's governed by wider thinking. And then you have global issues, and that's governed by wider thinking. Yes, you can tackle the outcomes of those things as a society. But the real way to deal with that is not by the outcomes, but it's by the very inception and source of those problems. The refugees that are sitting in a stadium with barbed wire around them, that are having to risk their own lives to cross from Turkey to Greece, for example, yes, you and I can do the good thing of giving them food, giving them clothes, giving them little bits in order to survive till the next day, giving them a blanket. But that's not dealing with the source of the problem itself, is it? Islam understood this as a society. And so it saw the wider issues of a community and sought to change it from its inception. This is how Rasulullah took a community from down here to up here within the space of a few years, by understanding the sources of the challenges themselves and not just throwing issues at the outcomes of those challenges. Now here, our mind begins to move to our specific topic. What are Islam's responsibilities towards women? You have seen in this discussion how Islam begins to see the societal issues, how it deals with the inception and the core of those issues in order to liberate those communities from the practices that they were engendered into. Women in the time of Rasulullah had certain challenges. When they were born, by and large, they would not survive. They would be born and immediately buried, or as buried as little girls. Women had no rights whatsoever. Now just think about that, because it's very difficult to conceptualize. When I say no rights, I mean they had nothing. They could not speak out. They could not have an opinion. They could not get themselves educated. They could not own anything for themselves. They had to do whatever a man told them to do. What kind of life was this for a woman? Islam came and said, there is no difference between man and woman. Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. Most surely the best of you is the one who is most proximate to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He said, paradise lies under the feet of mothers. Women and daughters are a blessing for you to have. And then Islam presented the greatest of women. It presented Lady Khadija alayhi salam and said, she is the queen of all women. And then Lady Khadija alayhi salam had her own daughter, Fatimeyah al-Zahra, salawatullah wa salamu alayha. And said, above the Queen Khadija, salamullahi alayha, is Fatimeyah al-Zahra, the queen of every woman to have ever existed from the first to the last. Rasulullah would go to Mi'raj, and he went to Sidratul Muntaha. He went to the closest place of existence to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where he could not come any closer, where he saw existence as existence is. When he returned and he longed for paradise, he would come to Fatima and smell Fatima and say, surely when I miss the fragrance of paradise, I go to Fatima the Zahra and smell from Fatima. Salawatullah wa salamu alayhi. The same way Islam understood society and the individual aspects of society and how to foster human beings to become the very best human beings they could become, it also needed to have a specific plan when it came to having a vehicle for a woman to be able to accomplish what she wanted to be able to accomplish. This will be our discussion tomorrow, inshallah. In the same light, understanding the specific challenges, what are those reasons that hold you back, and how Islam breaks those shackles in order to help you to become the very best and produce the very best in which you can become. Those men who was so engendered in burying women alive, thinking that a woman could have no say, thinking that a woman had no value, because they had not truly been liberated by Islam. When Rasulullah passed away, they reverted back to their own thinking about a way in which a woman was. Who could be more of a threat to the male ego of aggression and thinking that they are superior than Her Eminence Zahra alayhi salam? Because you cannot silence this woman. You cannot chain this woman. You cannot make yourself better, no matter how much you try to convince society that you are. And when they stole the Khilafat from Amir al-Mu'mineen, it was Zahra alayhi salam. She would go out and knock on the door of the houses of the Ansar and the Muhajir and say to them, do you not remember your pledge at Ghadir Khum, when you pledged allegiance to my husband Ali ibn Abi Talib? By Allah, if you follow my husband Ali and my sons Hassan and Hussein, no Muslim will differ in their belief system until the end of time. A man that believed he could bury women alive, a man that had not truly been emancipated from his idol worship, it is no surprise that he would attack the house of Fatimah al-Zahra. Narrations tell us that after the death of Rasulullah, Zahra alayhi salam would weep so much. Imagine for a moment the extent of the weeping of Sayyidah Zainab over Hussein. Imagine the weeping of Imam Zainul Abidin for Sayyidah Shuhada. And then imagine the weeping of Fatimah al-Zahra for her father. She wept not only for the loss of her father, but she wept for humankind, knowing what would happen after Rasulullah's presence was no longer physical within this world. The protection a father gives, nay, the protection that Rasulullah gave. That without him, revelation was to stop. And now without him, those people that had never truly come towards Islam could now go back towards their idol worship, towards their practice of hatred towards women. She would cry so much that the enemies would come and say, "Oh Ali, ask your wife." Look at the statement. Not ask Sayyidah. Not ask Sayyidat al-Nisa al-Alameen. Not ask Her Eminence. Ask your wife. Tell her to cry either in the night or in the day. Because if she cries throughout the entirety of the day and the night, then we are unable to sleep in the night and we are unable to practice in the day. And so Amir al-Mu'mineen had to come and say, "Oh my dear wife, Zahra, princess, please, the people of Medina have asked you to only cry in the night and in the day." And so Zahra had to choose one or the other. And then when they had stopped her from crying during the night or during the day, they came and said, "Oh Ali, tell your wife that she cries so much in the day or in the night. Please tell her to go outside the city to cry." And so Amir al-Mu'mineen had to build a house called Bayt al-Huzn, where she would cry day and night for the loss of her father. And when she was within her house, eventually they would come to the house of Ali ibn Abi Talib and Fatimah al-Zahra. Which house is this? This is the very same house that when Rasulullah would leave to go on an expedition, he would come to the house of Fatima and say, Assalamu alayki ya binti Rasulillah. Peace and blessings be upon you, O my daughter, O daughter of the Messenger of Allah. I bid you farewell, for I am leaving to go on an expedition. And when Rasulullah would return to Medina, the very first house that he would go and visit would be the house of Fatima al-Zahra. It is that very same house that Zahra would have that Rasulullah would pass away from. Rasulullah was lying in the lap of Sayyid Zahra. He was swaying between this world and the next world. And when he was swaying from this world to the next world, the narration tells us that a knock came upon the door of Rasulullah. At this moment, Zahra would call out to the door and say, "O man behind the door, please, Rasulullah is resting. He is in his final hours. Please do not disturb him. Allow him to rest." A few moments later, again the knock would come towards the door. Again Zahra would say, "Oh man, please do not come and disturb Rasulullah. He's in his final hours. Please, if you have a question, if you have a need, come later, we will assist you. But right now Rasulullah is in no position to be able to assist you." A third knock comes upon that door, and this time Zahra cannot respond to the door, cannot respond to the man. All she can do is begin to weep and cry. Her tears fall upon the face of Rasulullah. Rasulullah awakens from his sleep, from his rest in his final hours, looks in the face of his daughter. "Oh Fatima, my beloved, why are you crying?" She cannot help but express her grief. "Ya Rasulullah, there is someone outside the door. He has knocked 3 times and I have begged him to leave us alone for a few hours so that we may give you your peace, that we may give you your comfort." Rasulullah looks into the eyes of his daughter and says, "Oh Fatima, this is no ordinary man. This is the angel of death that has come to take my soul. Oh Fatima, the angel of death is so respectful of your door, so respectful of your door, that he does not dare enter into your house without your permission. He is not knocking for me, he is knocking for you, your Fatima Zahra." If this is the respect that the archangel of death gives to the door of Fatima, I ask you, what about Umar ibn al-Khattab? What about Abu Bakr? What about Qunfud? What about Khalid bin Walid? Because when they surrounded the house of Fatima al-Zahra, they weren't knocking. They were beginning to break the door down. They weren't just surrounding the house. The narrations tell us that there were 300 men surrounding that house. If there were 300 men surrounding this building right now trying to break in, can you imagine the panic that would be happening inside this house? Imagine Zainab, imagine Kulthum, imagine Hassan and Hussein, imagine Fatima having to hold her unborn child, trying to protect her unborn child from men. Not just 300 men. These men had fire, they had sticks, they unsheathed their swords ready to attack that house. At this moment the men, they turn towards Umar and they say, "Oh Umar, will you attack the house of Fatima? Is this really what you will dare do?" He responds, the hadith says, he says, "What in? Who cares? What if Fatima is inside that house?" At this moment he begins to threaten. He says, "Oh Ali, come outside. We want your bay'ah. If we do not take it, we will take it forcefully." At this moment Fatima comes towards the door. She comes to protect her family. She is standing behind that door. She calls out and says, "Oh Umar, you will not enter into this house. I will protect my family." At this moment Umar, in his rage, he says, "By Allah, I will break down this door." He begins to attack the door. Fatima is standing behind him. He breaks the door in such a way that it falls upon Sayyidatin Nisa al-Alameen. As the door falls, it crushes her between the wall and the door. There is a nail that is protruding that strikes into the chest of Fatima Zahra. The door falls upon Fatima. Fatima falls towards the ground. At this moment she calls out, "Fizza, come to my aid. Fizza, my child has been killed. Fizza, Umar enters into the house, one narration says he takes a whip and lashes the wrist of Fatima. Fatima comes to defend herself and putting her arm up, has her arms lashed. At this moment Umar comes and slaps the face of Fatima to Zahra. This is what Ali ibn Abi Talib has to see. This is what Hassan and Hussein has to see. But I tell you, oh Fatima to Zahra, it wasn't just you. At that moment all of us were struck by Umar. All of us were whipped by Umar. But it was going to be 60 years later that it wasn't just Zainab watching the atrocities, but Zainab herself was going to be taken in these very same ways. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. ماتم حسين يا حسين.
يا حسين 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 يا حسين